Alright, guys, so let's cover two big topics today to really lay out the situation. Now, there's a reason why Trump is so desperate for peace with Russia and to exit the European theatre of war. Yes, the conflict is horrible, a lot of manpower has been evaporated, and a lot of treasure has been spent on both sides. Europe is still clinging on, but at least Trump isn't really blind to the end game. The conflict is draining the US economy away, is destroying the odds of reshoring industries at a time when the national debt is at nosebleed levels. And from the US perspective, the big nightmare is Russia and China working together forever. And this goes beyond just oil and gas. Now, take Russian aluminum for example. After the war started, China began buying the bulk of Russian supply. It went from 10,000 tons to over 160,000 tons, a 16 times increase. And thanks to the sanctions, Russian supply couldn't flow to the West, so China bought essentially everything. And they are most likely getting a very good 10 to maybe 30% discount, maybe even more. And that's why US industries and EU factories are fighting an uphill battle. It's a big reason why China can produce affordable EVs and machinery like clockwork. Russia is helping China's economy. And that alone is a very big advantage. But the Russia China partnership also affects global financial markets as well. Russia's economy is not collapsing, it's still going to outgrow Europe in the next few years. And when you cut them away from SWIFT and dollars, you start transacting using alternatives. And in this case, Russia is aggressively using the Chinese currency. Now, this chart should be a chilling warning to the West. In 2024, Russia exported nearly $10 billion worth of goods to China in a single month. But over $13 billion worth of Russian exports was priced in the RMB. Not only has Russia and China fully de-dollarized the trade, Russia is de-dollarizing the world. Russian exporters are accepting RMB payments for their goods because where else are they getting their products from? Western markets are closed off, so China is the main outlet to get finished goods. And we can immediately understand why Trump is so desperate for a peace deal with Russia. Because the longer this drags on, longer this drags out, it's looking worse for the dollar while China's economy continues to benefit more and more. And before we get into the peace talks, it's important to dive deep into the US fiscal crisis. It's a huge factor that's driving this desperation to end the war no matter what Europe has to say. Now, in order to survive Trump's trade war, the US economy needs to keep spending. Any company looking to shift operations will need certainty, but certainty in a very warped way. Now, should you want to move production to the US, you obviously want the tariffs to stay forever. Doesn't work if the tariffs are 30% today and 0% tomorrow. You want the US closed off to as much foreign imports as possible, and it only makes sense. But for Washington, this puts them in a very big financial bind. In order to keep this up, you need to spend a lot of money to keep the wheels turning. The US national debt has officially surpassed an incredible $37 trillion, and that's a huge burden that's ahead of schedule. We never thought we would hit that amount so fast. And what happened to Doge? Wasn't that a plan to cut the deficit? Why are we now at $37 trillion? Because the snowball effect is only going to get worse from here going forward. Because the numbers are about to get so ridiculous, which means bigger monetary debasement, the dollars in your wallet are going to go up in flames. Now, interest expense on the national debt, just the interest alone, has reached $1 trillion in the first 10 months of the fiscal year. And this means by the end of 12 months, we should break 1.2 trillion. Now, interest alone is more than healthcare or defense at rates above 4, even just 3%. This is going to push the timeline for default closer and closer. So we have to observe the Russia situation as Trump trying to dismantle whatever pressure he can on the US economy. At the same time, he is hoping to remove the advantage of cheap commodities flowing to China. Because if he doesn't, we can expect the big, beautiful tax bill to balloon even further. We're going to have a version 2, we're going to have a version 3, which is unsustainable. More bonds will be issued which will hurt all bondholders at the end of the day. Well, the negative impacts are going to severely hit US investors above all. And it's really important we keep an eye on the US Russia situation because if that degrades, which it could, it will add more pressure on Trump's trade war. Now, here's who owns the majority of US treasuries. Foreigners hold a lot, around $8.5 trillion worth, but that's less than 25%. The rest are being held by domestic US people and investors. Now, the Federal Reserve can't buy anymore without triggering a QE. The US government also can't absorb anymore. So, its private investors will demand a higher yield to buy the bonds. We could be heading into a round two scenario where bond yields head up, but the dollar continues to fall. The exact same situation as April because trust is being lost in real time. And this debt situation is going to continue thanks to tariffs. US manufacturing is in a world of trouble, which means the subsidies and deficit spending is not going to stop, it simply can't. Now, looking at the ISM manufacturing update, we can see a big problem here. US industries have contracted yet again 4 months in a row. New orders have declined as well for the fifth straight month. People are just not buying stuff made in the US. Now, prices paid have also risen to the second highest level since June 2022. Now, remember when inflation rose to nearly 9%? People are now paying that much today, almost at that level. Employment is also down almost 12 months in a row. We are effectively in stagflation, especially in US industries. And a big shout out to our sponsor today, Indigo Precious Metals. When it comes to buying gold and silver, I trust Indigo Precious Metals in Singapore. They have made investing in precious metals safe, fast, easy, and simple for both small and large scale buying. I've been stacking gold for over a decade now, and I've learned two things when buying. You want to buy authentic gold bullion, and you want to buy it at the lowest premium possible to stretch your dollars even further. And I'm glad to say I found both of this at Indigo Precious Metals. Indigo Precious Metals is a leading retailer in Singapore. They specialize in physical gold, silver, and platinum. They are my one-stop shop when it comes to buying bullion. Their prices are sharp, and they have the best brands on sale, and I can test the gold on the spot. So if you're looking to make your first gold purchase, Indigo Precious Metals is the best place to start. Whether it's 1 ounce or 1 kilo, this is the reputable dealer you are looking for. So take action today. Click on the link below and enjoy a discount on your first purchase with the code SEANFOO. Start your gold stacking journey today. So this circles back to the desperation that Trump is feeling today. He needs to score a win and he needs to be swift. Zelensky went to Washington and Trump is trying to push for a meeting with Putin. Now, Trump wants Ukraine to cede Crimea to Russia and drop the idea of entering NATO. But it's going to be a really tall order, a really, really tall order. They desperately want US security guarantees and they're offering $100 billion to secure it, basically taking money from Europe to buy American weapons to get the US military on its side. Now, the big question here is the price of peace. Russia is in a victorious position, no question about it, and that's why Trump is trying to arm twist Ukraine for a deal. This is a double bind for the West because either way this plays out, they will lose. Now, if there's no peace deal, Putin will grind on with the conflict. The West and the US will lose more treasure, dollars will be burning up in the atmosphere like no tomorrow. But the cost of surrender will also benefit the Russians. As part of Putin's demands, he wants 5 regions of Ukraine, and this includes Luhansk, Donetsk, Kherson, and of course, Crimea, amongst others. And there are a lot of considerations here, but let's focus on economics and trade. Now, Crimea, as we know, gives Russia greater access, much greater access across the Black Sea. This means access to Turkey and Eastern Europe. And will Putin get them all? We really don't know. But if the EU stalls the peace deal and Russian troops roll over the regions, it won't look good. In a de facto way, Russia will have even more control over the region than ever before. Now, what we do know is Trump's desperation to end the war as soon as possible.
As you listen to Russia and Ukraine, which side has the better cards?
Well, I don't want to say that. I'm just here to be, look, this isn't my war. This is Joe Biden's war. He's the one that had a lot to do with this happening, and we want to get it ended. and we want it to end good for everybody. We want it to end good.
Now, at least for the US, the imperative here is to end the conflict soon. If Russia gets the regions or not, the US will still get what they want economically. Now, the plan is to access Russian resources. And if the five regions get ceded to Moscow, Russia's going to be an even bigger player in global minerals. And who do they have to thank for that? I guess the US when it comes to negotiations. And Ukraine itself has a ton of minerals, but the bulk of rare earths is within the Russian controlled oblast. Now, depending on the amount on the ground, this will be more than enough for US supply. Now, should Russia develop the mines, export the minerals, it would bring prices down. There will be more supply in the markets for the US to buy. And this is Trump's method of developing a supply chain through geopolitics. Now, of course, I have huge reservations about this idea. Russia is part of BRICS and China is a vital partner. And will the Chinese have anything to say about this arrangement? Also, can Russia trust the US long term? Because Trump is not going to be president forever. A new administration can undo all the progress in a heartbeat. Any security agreements, arrangements signed today isn't some forever pledge you can cling on to. Another problem is the frozen Russian reserves. There's still $300 billion of state assets locked away in Europe, mostly trapped in Belgium's Euroclear system. It's still earning interest and the proceeds are used to fund Ukraine. And will Trump force Europe to lift the financial sanctions and unlock the money? If it doesn't, it will just reinforce Russia's skepticism against the West. Now, in order to facilitate the Alaska summit, the US actually removed certain financial sanctions, but let's get real here. That won't be nearly enough. There has to be the dropping of broad based sanctions across the energy space and SWIFT as well. And if Trump wants to bring down energy prices and delay de-dollarization, he needs Russian minerals and money to flow into the global economy. Either way, Russia is sitting in a very commanding position today. Should the peace deal break down, the Western economies will resume their doom spiral down the toilet bowl. And if Russia gets their territories, they might just consolidate all their resources with China and BRICS. Then Western economies will lose even more leverage. And here's Putin confirming how trade with the US is actually growing during Trump's term. The dependency from the US to Russia is still there.
Incidentally, when the new administration came to power, bilateral trade started to grow. It's still very symbolic. Still, we have a growth of 20%. As I've said, we have a lot of dimensions for joint work. It is clear that the US and Russian investment and business cooperation has tremendous potential. Russia and the US can for each other so much in trade, digital, high-tech, and in space exploration.
So the US still imports nuclear fuels, precious metals, and fertilizers from Russia. That trade is still alive and well. And according to Putin, it actually went up by 20% since Trump took office. The deal with Moscow is very heavily rooted in economics. Trump needs to revive his supply chains, but because of his trade policy, he can't afford to be seen going around the world and blowing billions of dollars investing in mines. He can't really mimic what China is doing. So Russia, in an economic sense, is his only lifeline left. And in 2024, trade with Russia hit $5.2 billion. A 20% increase means it's probably around $6 billion this year. And notice Russia also isn't on Trump's tariff list. There's probably a reason why there isn't any reciprocal tariffs on Russian goods. Yes, they are under sanctions, but if those are lifted, I have a good feeling no tariffs will be imposed. So the end game is simple. End the war and try to cozy it up with Russia. Why? Because they have the resources you need. But let me know what you think. Will the US debt crisis continue to spiral down? And how will the US Russia peace treaty go down? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe. Be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.